Chapter 557. And the person in front of her took out a small knife, then suddenly smiled. Whether there's more inside or not, you'll know once you take off this face. As a shadow guard, if he didn't smile for a long time, then his fake facial paralysis would become real facial paralysis. So when he suddenly smiled, wouldn't that be especially terrifying? However, what really made Yao Rao afraid was the content of those words. As a woman whose face was the most important weapon, Yao Rao had always maintained her beauty. Don't look at how she didn't care about those human skin masks, even if they were ordinary or even ugly, they were only needed to conceal her identity. So, to some extent, her face was more important than her life. Looking at the current situation, he wanted to peel off her face. How could Yao Rao still care about seducing people? Don't, let me go. She fiercely struggled, but because she was tied up, the so-called struggle was merely shaking her head left and right, trying to get rid of that hand. Yao Rao was released as she wished, but the next moment, an ice-cold knife fell on her face. This time, Yao Rao didn't dare to move again, her eyes stared down at that knife. Just by looking at it, she knew that it was incomparably sharp. She feared that if she moved, her beautiful face would be cut. Soon after, she coldly looked at the person in front of her, as if she wanted to eat that person. However, this was merely a dangerous look in her eyes, so what was the use of it? Shwa, the side of Yao Rao's face was cut by that knife. It wasn't deep, probably just enough to break her skin, slowly forming a line of blood. The slight stinging pain even made Yao Rao dazed for a split second. Soon after, she let out a mournful shriek. She was caught off guard, and the closer she got, the stronger the attack she received was. The facial paralysis standing in front of her instantly cracked, and resisted the action of rubbing his ears. But before he could take any further action, Yao Rao cursed loudly, "Disgraceful thing, you actually dare to injure my face, you actually dare to." The shadow guard expressionlessly brushed his hand twice, using his action to tell her that there was nothing he didn't dare to do. Yao Rao seemed as if she was about to collapse, shouting and screaming. She completely didn't care about the image she usually maintained. Since it didn't work, she changed the target. "Li Hongyuan, are you a man or not? How could you do such a thing? Even the women in the inner courtyard are rarely like you." The air seemed to stagnate. Li Hongyuan's subordinates looked at Yao Rao with a bit of admiration. This was the first time they had seen such a courageous person. However, their master was not a person who was easily provoked. Whether your words had any effect or not, many times, it depended on his mood. Li Hongyuan was originally sitting leisurely, his head lowered as he fiddled with the jade thumb ring on his hand. At this moment, he raised his head, noisy, and "Woo, take off the skin and then slice off the meat. In any case, in this manner, no amount of meat will go to waste." Li Hongyuan's voice seemed to be lower than before, a bit deeper. Hearing this, the people around him couldn't help but have their hair stand on end. They thought, Master was indeed not right during this period of time. Right now, it was only becoming more and more obvious. This also meant that it could possibly explode at any time. That kind of master was absolutely dangerous. Yao Rao still wanted to say something, but in the next moment, Enwu slashed horizontally. The two sides of her mouth, extending to her cheeks, were all cut open. If she opened her mouth, it would probably become a real bloody mouth. Yao Rao's pupils rapidly contracted. However, she also couldn't say anything because her neck was firmly gripped. Enwu thought, his skinning technique was actually very good. A thin layer could be completely intact without the slightest bit of opening. After that, the recovery was actually quite fast. TSK, why couldn't she be obedient? A rope was inserted horizontally into Yao Rao's mouth, strangling to the deepest part of the wound. Soon after, Yao Rao's head was fixed to the wooden stake behind her. In this way, if she still had the courage to shake her head, and Wu actually didn't mind a bit of trouble when he made his move. In any case, this face was already damaged. It didn't matter if there was more meat on the skin. To him, although it was a failure, it also didn't matter. It was just a practice for him to practice. No matter how beautiful a woman was, this kind of appearance couldn't make her beautiful. Normal people wouldn't look at it. Those who were timid would probably pee and then go to the side and vomit until the sky turned dark. At this moment, Yao Rao also didn't have any thoughts. The rope was embedded into her flesh, and the middle position reached the root of her tongue. Not only was it painful, it was also very, very uncomfortable. Her mouth made woo-woo-woo sounds, but she didn't dare to move. Yao Rao's hatred overflowed to the heavens. In her opinion, Li Hongyuan really wasn't a man. Could a man be like him? At the same time, she was also a bit regretful. If she had known it would be like this, why would she have done so many things? Unfortunately, Gong Jiu came in from the outside. He could hardly hear the sound of footsteps. He slightly leaned forward. "Master, there's a discovery." "Speak." Gong Jiu methodically explained the previous matter. Li Hongyuan stretched out his hand. Gong Jiu put the box in his hand. Li Hongyuan opened it. A fat worm, but it looked like it was dead. It didn't move at all. It was reasonable to say that the incense ash was sprinkled on the worm's body. But now, the worm had turned gray, and it was very uniform. There was no trace of the incense ash on the worm's face. Reasonable to say, the inside of the worm was also quite clean. It was as if the incense ash was completely absorbed into the worm's body. So, it's this worm that made people die inexplicably, and after death, it's still like a living person. Replying to Master, this subordinate is just guessing. There were some things that Gong Jiu obviously needed to confirm. Li Hongyuan raised his head and looked at Gong Jiu. He closed the box and threw it to Gong Jiu. "There's a ready-made one here. Directly cut open her head and take a look. A living person and a dead person should be different. Gong Jiu, after the worm is taken out, it's best to make sure she's alive." This subordinate will try his best. Everything that Gong Jiu said just now, everyone present had heard it clearly. Yao Rao's eyes suddenly widened. Her eyes were filled with unconcealable fear. Her head was cut open while she was still alive. That scene, just thinking about it made people frightened. Yao Rao didn't even care about the pain. She shook her head. When Li Hongyuan ordered, and Wu had already stopped his actions. And the skin on Yao Rao's face was peeled off. Following her movements, the skin swayed on her face. That scene was really. However, it didn't have any effect on them. "Master, just in case, shouldn't we interrogate her first?" An heir suggested. With some cautiousness. Facing a master whose mood wasn't right, they were actually tired enough. Not to mention other things, they couldn't even show their cautiousness. If they couldn't, who knows where they would touch his nerve. At that time, they didn't know how they would be unlucky. Although, as long as they didn't do things like betrayal, their little lives wouldn't be in danger. However, if they could live well, they reckoned that no one would be willing to cause trouble for themselves. They weren't masochists. Li Hongyuan nodded his head indifferently. Then, he leisurely got up and left. From beginning to end, they didn't quite understand the meaning of him sitting here. However, he was the master. What he wanted to do was his own business. Others couldn't interfere. "Gong Jiu, first come with this prince." Outside, Li Hongyuan stood with his hands behind his back, looking at the sky. "How much do you know about goo worms?" Not to mention other things, just the effect of this worm made people have no choice but to be on guard. Gong Jiu simply said what he knew. Li Hongyuan turned back and looked at him with particularly calm eyes. It seemed that there was something condensed in the depths of his eyes. This is all you know. A very general outline. Li Hongyuan's gaze fell on his hand. It seemed that he only knew about this thing. How did he know the method to control this thing in his hand? He also knew how to keep it and happened to have a suitable box. Gong Jiu obviously also understood that there was something wrong. However, he really only knew that. Even if he deliberately dug up his memory, it was still the same. Previously, it seemed that after meeting the little thing in his hand, he naturally knew how to deal with it. Gong Jiu was very sure that he didn't have any memory loss. He could completely connect it, and there was nothing wrong with it. In reply to Master, this subordinate indeed only knows this. Gong Jiu slightly bowed his head and replied. Don't suspect the people you use. This principle didn't apply to Li Hongyuan. It was said that he didn't trust his subordinates, but he didn't hesitate to instruct many things. However, it was also a joke to say that he trusted his subordinates very much. Under normal circumstances, Gong Jiu's situation would make his master suspicious. Li Hongyuan didn't express anything at all. He just waved his hand. Gong Jiu's brows furrowed slightly. Although he was used to Li Hongyuan's style, he still felt a little uneasy. He couldn't tell what he was thinking, but he didn't explain himself. He respectfully replied and left. Li Hongyuan casually picked up a leaf. There were indeed many things that had changed. At least in his previous life, he had never heard of such a thing. Of course, the possibility that he just didn't discover it was more likely. Otherwise, he would have made preparations for it in this life. However, there was one thing that Li Hongyuan was certain of. This thing sounded mysterious, but it was still not possible to use it silently. There should be a lot of limitations. Southern Qi had begun sending spies to other countries decades ago. This point definitely wouldn't change because of his rebirth. In his previous life, he believed that in the early stages, no one had thought highly of him. In the end, he had seized the Qi Yuan Empire. It was 100% certain that he had interfered with some people's plans. Those people had no reason to let him go so easily. Whether it was in the palace or on the battlefield, he was different from other emperors. It was probably that there were fewer people, and even fewer people who could come into contact with his body. Therefore, this insect needed to be in close contact, and it wasn't likely to be silent. There would always be some signs. In addition, this thing was difficult to raise, which meant that it was rare. As for how rare it was, perhaps it could be verified by looking at Yao Rao. If there were a lot of them, these spies should all have them. Gong Jiu prepared to go take a look at the body of Marquis Changping's second wife. Without the insect, there should be some changes. However, halfway there, Gong Jiu was stopped. Because of Yao Rao's super big mouth, her words leaked out, and many words couldn't be heard clearly. In a situation where there was no other way, she really couldn't bear it. She was just a spy from another country, so Gong Jiu naturally didn't have the kindness to disinfect or anesthetize her. Rather simply and crudely, he directly sewed up Yao Rao's face. When Yao Rao cried out in pain, he unceremoniously used a silver needle to shut her up. Everyone else watched silently, and then looked again at the swaying silver needle. Obviously, he could have used it to stop the pain in another place. Sure enough, Gong Jiu was a blockhead who didn't know how to be tender and protective of the fairer sex. But he forgot that he also didn't know how to be tender and protective of the fairer sex. For example, when Shadow 5 made his move, did he hesitate for even a breath? After it was done, Yao Rao seemed to only have one breath left. The interrogation continued, but Yao Rao was not as happy as before. She knew very well that even if she told everything, she wouldn't have a good end. As a shadow guard, it was basic for him to observe people's expressions. It was difficult for him not to know what Yao Rao was thinking. If you tell me quickly, can you die quickly? Or do you really want to have your head cut open while you're still alive? I don't have a goo in my body. Yao Rao said rather emotionally. Clearly, Yao Rao at least knew about this thing. Whether she had it or not was hard to say because Yao Rao still had the desire to live. It was difficult to say whether the goo was controlled by her or by him. The interrogation afterwards could be considered to be smooth. Looking at Yao Rao, it seemed she was indeed asking for a quick death, as if she could prove that she didn't have any goo worm in her body. However, who could be sure whether she was deliberately doing this in order to leave them false information? Yao Rao was, in the end, someone who had undergone special training. She might not be able to tell a lie that was 70% true and 30% false. However, Li Hongyuan's doubts were resolved in the end. Marquis Chumping's second wife and Wan Ruizhong's second wife, Wei Shi, had clearly entered Qi Yuan many years ago. At that time, Southern Qi still wasn't the current emperor. According to Wei Shi, spies were sent out by those in power, and Yao Rao's target of service was an ambitious prince of Southern Qi. These two groups of people should clearly be from different walks of life, yet they were mixed together. Thus, one side must have betrayed their master. Was it Marquis Chumping's second wife and Wei Shi? The possibility was very small. Yao Rao did indeed say that she had sought refuge with the crown prince of Southern Qi. She had come to Qi Yuan because the crown prince of Southern Qi had arranged for her to persuade the prince she was publicly loyal to. With this point, then what caused Yao Rao to betray her master in her previous life, but in this life? Li Hongyuan twirled the leaves. The juice dyed his fingertips green. He had made many arrangements in Southern Qi. Bit by bit, he had messed up the situation in Southern Qi. Perhaps something had happened here that caused the Enchanting Rao to betray her master. Li Hongyuan narrowed his eyes slightly. If Sun Yilan had really betrayed his country, then did he seek refuge with Southern Qi or the former way? Other than these two, there was no third choice. Since Sun Yilan hadn't moved, then he didn't mind luring the snake out of its hole. Chapter 558. Originally, he thought that after his master heard these words, he would immediately stir up a storm and return to the mansion immediately. As for them, they would naturally deal with it later. After all, compared to him, all of them added up together were not as important as a finger of the princess consort. Bodyguard Qian said that he was ready. No matter now or later, it was normal for his master to vent his anger on the princess consort when she suddenly had an accident. However, there seemed to be something wrong. Why was there no movement? Bodyguard Qian lowered his head and carefully lifted his eyelids to look at his master. It was fine if he didn't look, but when he did, his soul almost flew out of his body. They all knew that something was wrong with their master recently. When he was in front of the princess consort, he would try his best to restrain himself. However, they were different. It was good enough that he didn't explode. At this moment, he looked like a full-fledged devil. Not to mention other things, just his eyes alone were enough to make people's legs tremble and their hearts beat wildly. It seemed that they would lose control and die in the next moment. It wasn't that they hadn't seen their master's violent and ruthless side. Sometimes, he even seemed to have lost his mind. That horror made them want to stay as far away from him as possible, let alone being within 30 feet of him. It was just that others could do it, but they couldn't. Of course, others generally couldn't see that scene. However, Bodyguard Qian felt that compared to now, the past seemed to be nothing. Obviously, nothing had been done yet. Bodyguard Qian didn't know that if he had seen the scene after Li Hongyuan slaughtered the imperial palace in his previous life and chopped up Luqingdi with his own hands, his reaction probably wouldn't be so big. What do you mean by unconscious? Tell me clearly. Li Hongyuan's voice was as calm as ever. However, in bodyguard Qian's ears, it didn't sound like a human's voice, but like the voice of the nine nether purgatory. For no reason, he felt a gush of coldness coming from all directions with a sticky feeling that couldn't be shaken off. It kept drilling from the surface of his body to the crevices of his bones. At any time, it would turn into ice shards and explode without leaving a trace. The former guard tried his best to control himself so that he wouldn't lose his composure. "Master, you left the Wang Fu this morning." When it was time, Wang Fei did not get up. The people around Wang Fei were worried that something was wrong. After that, they could not wake Wang Fei up no matter what. Mama Gong first took Wang Fei's pulse and did not find anything wrong. Then she felt that her medical skills were shallow and called for the Fu doctor. The result was the same. There was nothing wrong with Wang Fei. The pulse showed that Wang Fei was sleeping. After that, Mama Gong sent this subordinate to the estate to ask for instructions from Master. Guard Qian said. It was winter, but his palms and back were drenched in sweat. He had been waiting for Li Hongyuan to act out. Return to the capital. Li Hongyuan didn't say or do anything else and strode out of the manor. In order for Jingwan to have a good night's sleep, he purposely arranged for the matter to be handled during the day. Even if there was a great risk of being discovered, at this point, he didn't care. How could Guard Qian dare to be negligent? He quickly found someone to prepare a horse and called Gongzhou. The people who interrogated Yao Rao also knew about this matter. Without seeing Li Hongyuan's condition, they all had a feeling of falling into an ice house. It must be said that they had long disregarded life and death. At this time, they were also praying that Wang Fei was okay. They also hoped that this was not the result of man-made actions. Otherwise, no matter if it was the person who did it or them, none of them would have a good ending. The former's crime was naturally unforgivable, and they obviously failed to protect their master. Although the shadow guards couldn't openly return to the capital, Wang Fei's matter would definitely require them to act. Yao Rao and so on were naturally left there and no one cared. It's just that, the servants of the manor naturally didn't dare to set foot in this place. Yao Rao was tied up, whether she could live or not, it really depended on luck to see if anyone would come to save her, or if the people of Jin Wangfu who had discovered their conscience remembered her. Of course, as a spy, she was not the only one who was still alive, and the others were also facing the possibility of starving to death. However, no matter if it was Yao Rao or the others, in fact, they were of no use. Otherwise, in any case, they were the shadow guards under the living king of hell. They wouldn't lose their sense of propriety and completely disregard everything. At least, they would clean up their tails and let go just like that. Other than the fact that they were of no use, there was also the fact that they didn't care whether they would be exposed or not. The living king of hell personally opened the way even if the others wanted to help open the way, they were completely unable to catch up to Li Hongyuan. On the official road, those who discovered the movement had already moved aside. Those who didn't discover it could only admit that they were unlucky. Being sent flying was considered light, but dying under the horse's hooves all right. For the time being, such a bad situation hadn't occurred. It must be said that the living king of hell had muddled along for a long time, the number of times he had ridden a horse wasn't few. However, in the past, even if he made a ruckus and caused an accident, the people who suffered from the unexpected calamity would only suffer insignificant injuries and pain. It was completely different from this time. At the city gate, the guards dutifully wanted to stop the people. As a result, Li Hongyuan's whip directly waved over, using 120% of his strength, directly whipping the people until their skin and flesh split open, revealing the eerie white bones. That face felt like it had been slashed diagonally by a knife, as if even the head was split into two halves. Such a situation certainly frightened everyone out of their wits. However, after some people recognized who it was, they were as silent as cicadas in winter and didn't dare to be angry. Speaking of which, such a bad thing had never happened to Li Hongyuan in the past. However, in the minds of these people, it didn't seem strange that the living king of hell would do such a thing. Li Hongyuan returned to Prince Yu's mansion. When he turned over and dismounted, he threw the whip aside and strode to the main courtyard. Obviously, the thing about Jingwan hadn't spread in Prince Yu's mansion. When the servants saw Li Hongyuan, they just saluted politely. Li Hongyuan's footsteps were like the wind, but his footsteps were still steady, and his clothes were neat. It seemed that nothing serious had happened. And because he was fast, they didn't have time to feel Li Hongyuan's terrifying aura, so they didn't know that a storm was coming. In contrast, the scene in Begonia Elegant House was completely different. Jingwan's temper was good enough, and she was not strict with the servants. Therefore, even if they were afraid of Li Hongyuan, under normal circumstances, they would be quiet enough and full of people. However, now there was a sense of dead silence. Those who were not qualified to serve in the room, when they saw Li Hongyuan, did not even dare to breathe loudly, so that they didn't even greet him. In the room, Nanny Gong, Jingwan's wet nurse, and her chief servant girl were all in. Li Hongyuan saw Jingwan sleeping soundly on the bed at a glance. It seemed that she really just wanted to sleep. Li Hongyuan forced himself to slow down. At this moment, Nanny Gong keenly sensed that he was suppressing his emotions to the extreme. Li Hongyuan sat down by the bed and held Jingwan's hand. It was not cold, but the blue veins on the back of his hand were clearly protruding, and there was still a gap between his palm and Jingwan's hand. Wan, you are getting lazier and lazier. What time is it? Hurry up and get up. There was a visible gentleness in his voice, as usual, but the look in his eyes was really creepy. No matter what Li Hongyuan was like, Nanny Gong was not afraid of him. He was a rare exception. However, at this moment, she felt a chill down her spine, and her hands and feet were a little stiff and numb. Li Hongyuan was still trying to wake Jingwan up with gentle words. He did not scold the servants, nor did he call Gong Jiu. Everyone present knew how much he cared about Jingwan. Therefore, the more he acted like this, the more frightening it was. Nanny Gong walked from the bed to the door without making a sound. At this moment, she was probably the only one who could barely move, even though her hands and feet were still stiff. Sure enough, Gong Jiu and the others hurried over. It seemed that Li Hongyuan was much calmer than them. Nanny Gong just tilted her head at Gong Jiu without saying anything. Gong Jiu understood and went straight in without saying anything. When Gong Jiu saw Li Hongyuan, he paused. He clearly felt the feeling guard Qian had just now. He clenched his fists and continued to walk forward. Master. Li Hongyuan did not turn back. He turned around and sat beside Jingwan's head. He clenched his 5 fingers a few times, as if to relax his overly tense fingers. Then, he carefully helped Jingwan up and leaned on his body. Gong Jiu did not dare to be negligent. He went forward and carefully checked Jingwan, withstanding the unprecedented pressure. During the whole process, Li Hongyuan appeared to be very quiet. It was unprecedentedly quiet. Master, it's the sleeping spell. After checking Jingwan's condition, Gong Jiu subconsciously came to a conclusion. He did not hide it or hesitate and told Li Hongyuan. Li Hongyuan suddenly raised his head and lifted his leg to kick Gong Jiu. Gong Jiu's body flew backward. The bystanders seemed to have heard the sound of bones breaking. Gong Jiu landed on the ground. His expression did not change much, but when he stood up with his hand on his chest, he paused for a moment. Blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Then, his throat moved. Obviously, he swallowed most of the blood back. Nanny Gong moved her feet, but in the end, she did not go forward to help him. Guard Qian and the others at the door frowned but did not move. As the bedroom of the two masters, under normal circumstances, they would not even let him take a step in. After wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, Gong Jiu got up and knelt on one knee in the distance. He lowered his head slightly. He could roughly guess the reason for the kick. He clearly did not understand the spell, but at this time, he knew that it was the result of the spell. Not only that, of all times, something happened after he knew about the spell. Gong Jiu felt that if he were in Gong Jiu's shoes, he would be suspicious as well. However, he had nothing to explain now. Unsolvable. Li Hongyuan spoke again, but it was obvious that his voice was much lower. Your subordinate is incompetent. In this situation, it was simply more powerless than not knowing. Find out how the sleeping spell works and when it works. Li Hongyuan glanced at all the people present. If anything happens to the princess consort, Li Hongyuan did not need to say the following words. They all knew what the consequences would be. Li Hongyuan gently brushed the hair on Jingwan's temples, slid down her cheeks, and finally fell on Jingwan's lower abdomen. Then, he felt the movement under his palm. He did not know if it was an illusion, but the frequency of the little guy's movement seemed to be different from before, as if he had sensed his mother's situation. However, this showed that the sleeping spell did not affect the child. When he could not wake up Jingwan and did not respond to his words and actions, the child's movement, to some extent, gave Li Hongyuan a little comfort. Get some food. At this time, of course, no one was so ignorant as to not know what Li Hongyuan wanted to eat. Perhaps Nanny Gong had already expected Jingwan's possible situation, so she was prepared in advance. Therefore, a bowl of carefully prepared porridge was quickly served. Li Hongyuan was very patient and fed Jingwan small mouthfuls. In reality, Nanny Gong and the others had tried to feed Jingwan before, but even if it was just porridge, she could not swallow it with a spoon. Now that Jingwan finally ate it, they heaved a sigh of relief. As for the way the prince fed her, no one would blush or blush. At a time like this, no one could care about that. Then, Li Hongyuan personally wiped Jingwan's face and hands. After looking at Jingwan for a while, he seemed to think of something. He asked Nanny Gong to get a book, held Jingwan in his arms, and began to read unhurriedly. Li Hongyuan's state puzzled the maids more or less. When the princess was in trouble, he did not seem to be anxious. But didn't Dr. Gong say that there was no cure for the sleeping spell? Then, what was going on? However, as people who had followed Li Hongyuan for several years, they basically knew his current situation. He looked fine now, but in fact, he was already stretched to the limit. The reason why he hadn't snapped yet was because he was forcing himself to hold on. He knew very well that if he were to go crazy at this time, if he were to lose his mind, the consequences would be even worse. It wouldn't benefit Jingwan at all. Coincidentally, it would also allow some people to easily get what they wanted. Therefore, he was calm and unhurried. It was as if things would move in the opposite direction when they reached an extreme. If he moved one step faster, he would lose control of his rhythm. However, no one knew how long he could maintain his current state. Moreover, no one knew what he would do if the sleeping spell could not be cured. No matter what the result was, for him either Jingwan would be safe and sound and the string would be loosened, or he would break directly. However, no matter what the result was, it would definitely cause great harm to him. Although Nanny Gong did not like some of his methods, she had watched him grow up. He was the only child of the imperial noble consort. It would be a lie to say that she did not feel sorry for him. In addition, the princess consort rarely went out recently, and when she went out, she basically did not come into contact with any outsiders. However, she was poisoned by the sleeping goo. Something must have happened in the prince's mansion. Nanny Gong also blamed herself for this. Chapter 559. At this time, Gong Mama was the lady protector back. Because the guards in the Wangfu were loose on the outside but tight on the inside, Gong Mama was not worried about this. As for the other servants in the Wangfu, they would be in contact with Jingwan directly or indirectly. Although it seemed that Jingwan's wet nurse was in charge, Gong Mama would secretly check on them. If she found something wrong or dissatisfied with it, she would replace them. In the end, she was still careless. Gong Mama was not sure. However, when it came to handling matters, they were swift and decisive. Starting from the people around Jingwan, including Jingwan's nanny, they sorted them out one by one. No one was spared. If there was even the slightest bit of wrongdoing, they would be severely punished and would not be tolerated. When Gong Mama was in charge of the Wangfu, the shadow guards were in charge of the outside. In short, they would not let go of any clues. When Gong Jiu was helpless about the goo, if they did not find out the source, they would not be able to find a solution. Even though, in reality, they were very clear that there would definitely be a follow-up to this matter. No one would put a venomous spell on the princess for no reason. Moreover, such a thing like venomous spell did not exist in Qiyuan. To put it arrogantly, in Qiyuan, if there was really something strange, it would not be able to escape Li Hongyuan's knowledge and then, he would control it. From this, it could be seen that the possibility of the other princes doing it was very small. Basically, it could be ruled out. Moreover, if they knew the details of Li Hongyuan, then what they would do was to find a way to expose the matter to Lu Qingdi instead of using this roundabout way to deal with Jingwan. In their minds, Lu Qingdi was the person who could control everything. As long as their imperial father suppressed him, then there would be no room for them to turn the situation around. Just now, they found out about the existence of Gu from Chongping Marquis' second wife, and Yao Rao obviously also knew about it. Then, who was the culprit? But even so, what should be investigated must be investigated. Knowing the mastermind behind the scenes, they must know who the mole was. Especially when they could not directly confront the person behind the scenes, they must find out who the mole was and completely crush him. The facts proved that the people of Jin Qinwang Fu were indeed not vegetarians. After a thorough investigation, all the small problems were cleared up. The person who was most likely to have planted the goo in Jingwan was also found out. It could only be said that this matter was very unexpected. It could be described as completely unexpected. Qing Ju knelt in front of Li Hongyuan, sobbing softly. Her body could not stop trembling, and her entire person was filled with remorse. There was another person beside her, a man. He was Jin Qinwang Fu's male troop leader, Qin Yi. He looked like a refined man, but at this moment, he was left with half his life, lying limp on the ground. Even though there was not the slightest scar on the surface, nor was there any bleeding. Ever since Li Hongyuan came back and carried Jingwan, other than going to the clean room, he had not let go of her. At that time, when Li Hongyuan brought Jingwan to the northwest, only Gong Mama and He Mei followed him. During this period, the people in the Wangfu were more free, especially the people in the main courtyard. Perhaps it was Qing Yi's intention, or perhaps it was undeniably true love. Anyway, Qing Ju's personality was a bit jumpy. She, who had never thought of marrying, secretly got together with Qing Yi. Logically speaking, even if the other party was an actress, she was still raised in the Wangfu. If he really had feelings for the Qing Ju, Jingwan would definitely help them. In reality, not only Jingwan, no one in the entire Wangfu knew about their private interactions. This was obviously a problem. Even if the number of times they met was very few, but if they didn't want to be discovered, they would definitely be very careful every time they met. Moreover, if it wasn't something that absolutely couldn't be said, Qing Ju usually wasn't very good at hiding things, but Qing Yi was able to coax her. The reason for Qing Yi's actions was quite simple. He was an actress. Even if Qing Ju was also a lowly person, she was the princess's maid. If she was released and changed her household registration, many people would fight to marry her. He was not good enough for her. It was a very simple reason. However, Qing Ju was eloquent. After such a long time, she still did not show any clues. No, there might be clues, but it was not obvious. Besides, she was an optimist. It was normal for her to be in a good mood all day long. Besides, in the eyes of others, if she really had someone she liked, she would not hide it. It was normal for people to ignore things that they were used to. Perhaps Qing Yi had grasped this point, so he took action on Qing Ju. This was indeed Nanny Gong's carelessness. This crime could not be escaped. However, perhaps the only thing that was worth rejoicing was that Qing Ju did not take the initiative to do this. She became Qing Yi's accomplice unintentionally. However, the problem now was that Qing Yi himself did not know what it was. Qing Yi was a spy who had been assigned to the prince's mansion since a long time ago. However, he had always been a well-behaved actor and did not ask about anything. His background was also very clear. As a spy, he was quite unqualified, even the kind that was very inconspicuous. However, it was precisely this kind of situation that gave the King of Hell a fatal blow at the crucial moment. How ridiculous it was to fall into the hands of a small person. However, no one could laugh now. Chapter 560. Originally, he had planned to find the culprit and take the initiative to attack, but the clues seemed to have been cut off. Li Hongyuan had one foot on the couch and one foot on the ground. Jingwan naturally sat between his legs with her legs half bent and leaned on him. She was still dressed as she usually did at home, no different from her usual afternoon nap. Unfortunately, now was not the time for her afternoon nap. Moreover, she had slept for more than 20 hours since last night. At this moment, there was still an afterglow on the horizon. However, he believed that there would be news soon. The days were getting shorter and shorter. At this moment, Li Hongyuan was very calm. Even the terrifying aura around him seemed to have disappeared. Of course, this was on the premise that one did not look into his eyes. He was completely a quiet and handsome man. Qing Ju's sobbing had also disappeared. There were quite a number of people present, but it was so quiet that it was scary. It was as if no one dared to breathe. That kind of feeling was really not too good. "Wake him up," Li Hongyuan said in a low voice. It was obvious who this person was referring to. Gong Zhou took out a few silver needles and inserted them. Qing Yi on the ground showed signs of waking up. The main courtyard was the most special place in the prince's mansion. If it was outside, it would not be so comfortable to wake up. As for Gong Zhou, the kick that Li Hongyuan gave him was not light. He estimated that 3 of his ribs were broken, but it was actually considered light. If his master had used all his strength, he would have died. After all, breaking his ribs and piercing his heart was not difficult for his master. With such an injury, Gong Zhou only looked a little pale. Other than that, whether it was walking or inserting the needles, his movements were very stable. No one could tell that there was anything wrong with him. Although Qing Yi had the identity of a spy, but in essence, he was still an actor. He was placed in Jin Qin Wang Fu early on. It must be known that Li Hongyuan had always concealed it well. Even if he was afraid of him, he did not treat him as a real threat. Because a person, no matter how fierce he was, he would not be able to overturn the heavens. Placing a spy in his mansion was only because he was cautious and did not want to leave anything out. Perhaps this person was not valued. Perhaps he had long been forgotten and was entrusted with an important task at this special time. A member at the lowest level, no matter how sophisticated he was, in front of a person like Li Hongyuan, he was just an ant that could be easily crushed. Therefore, when he faced Li Hongyuan personally, even if he tried his best to control, his body would still tremble like a sieve. And this appearance, Li Hongyuan's subordinates puzzled and depressed. This kind of person could be a spy. But the truth was, not only was he a spy, he had become one. However, this time, it also taught them a lesson. Sure enough, they could not underestimate anyone. Previously, they did not put this kind of person in their eyes at all. And because they knew their place, they never doubted him. However, this lesson, to them, was really too painful. If the Wang Fei was to sleep and not wake up, then the consequences, they did not even dare to think about it. Just the current situation made them tremble uncontrollably. That thing, when and where did you get it from? Li Hongyuan asked calmly. In fact, Qingyi was the only place that was unfavorable to Jingwan. However, because he did not know what it was, even if he said it was a venomous insect, according to the results of the interrogation, that was only what the person who gave him the venomous insect told him. He did not know what the insect looked like. Other than knowing that it could make people fall into a deep sleep, he knew nothing. If it was someone who did not know anything about venomous insects, perhaps they would be fooled so easily. But Gong Zhou, who seemed to know a lot about venomous insects but had no memory of it, was an accident. Therefore, there were still some doubts. Could it be that this person was just a shield, and the real culprit was still hiding? This question had been asked more than once. Even if he had suffered a great crime before, it was still not as great as the pressure he felt when facing Li Hongyuan. With a trembling voice, he repeated what he had said before. Although their status was low, there was no absolute prohibition against them leaving the prince's mansion. These people, compared to those concubines and concubines who were not allowed to leave the prince's mansion, had more freedom. After that, Li Hongyuan ordered the guards who knew the time of Qingyi's departure. Even if they knew that there was a problem now, they did not dare to hide anything. In fact, all of their statements were the same. There was nothing that did not match. Even if they were questioned carefully, there was nothing suspicious. Investigate the other people who were on duty that day again. Regardless of whether they were related or not, since Li Hongyuan ordered them to investigate, they would definitely investigate again. There was no problem the first time, and there was no problem the second time. However, on the third time, there was a problem. On that day, there was obviously a guard who changed his patrol time with another guard because of something. In other words, he was not supposed to be on patrol. However, like the other people in the same team, he said that he had seen Qingyi. This was quite abnormal. What was even more abnormal was that the other people in the same team said that this guy was the one who was on patrol with them. As the leader of the guards, Guard Qian was in charge of the prince's mansion security. Every half a month, he would regroup the guards. The time of Qingyi's departure was about 7 or 8 days. There was no reason for him to mix up the members of his team. However, the comrade who took over said that he was on patrol with them. Moreover, he definitely did not see Qingyi. Under normal circumstances, if 12 people said the same thing, and one person said something different, it was obvious that he would choose to believe the former. However, Guard Qian and the rest's expressions changed. If they did not call all the guards here and not just those who were on duty that day, this point would probably be overlooked. When everyone said the same thing, the one who was different might be the key. Other things aside, in Gong Zhou's hands, there was a type of medicine that could make a person's memory blurry for a certain period of time. If someone deliberately did it, then, they would be able to remember some things that they wanted them to remember. As for whether this was the case, it was not difficult to prove. All they had to do was to ask about other things in detail. As expected, other than Qingyi's incident, everyone else's memory was very blurry. Especially the person who changed his patrol, he even had a confused memory. And this situation was exactly the same as the effect of the medicine in Gong Jiu's hands. This time, not only Li Hongyuan, but also the others, looked at Gong Jiu with a strange gaze. Gong Jiu lowered his head slightly and pursed his lips. Compared to his usual indifference, his expression was exceptionally serious. However, Li Hongyuan did not open his mouth to ask, nor did he open his mouth to explain anything. Even though this matter was not done by him, but the medicine came from his hands. It could basically be confirmed. Then, he had an unshirkable responsibility. However, he had his own private courtyard to study all kinds of things. Others would not easily set foot in it. Usually, he would personally clean the courtyard. Moreover, in order to prevent unrelated people from entering, he had placed a lot of poison in the courtyard. On the surface, no one would be able to find any clues. However, if someone wanted to spy on him, they might lose their life. Li Hongyuan shifted his gaze away from Gong Jiu and landed on Qingyi. Take him away and interrogate him. Qingyi was dragged away. This time's interrogation might not be so simple. Based on the current situation, it was very likely that Qingyi's goo was not obtained from someone outside, but from someone in Jin Qin Wang Fu. This person might be the key. Based on the current situation, it was hard to say whether they could interrogate him or not. And before the truth came to light, everyone was a suspect. Li Hongyuan held Jingwan's hand, his gaze quietly fell on her face. It was unknown what he thought of, but his left foot suddenly curled into a smile. It was sinister, treacherous, cold, and ruthless, intertwined together, incomparably terrifying. Who was Li Hongyuan? He was the living king of hell, controlling the power of Qi Yuan. He wanted to see who the rat behind this was. Even if he couldn't find out, he would not let go of one person even if he wrongly killed hundreds of thousands of people. Especially since they chose to target Wan, then they must be prepared to be cut into pieces. For Li Hongyuan, if they made a move on him and succeeded, he might even admire the person behind this. Making a move on Jin Qin Wang Fei, in essence, was still targeting Jin Qin Wang. But since they didn't directly target him, it could only mean that the other party was quite afraid of him and knew that if they directly clashed with Li Hongyuan, their chances of winning were too small. He was the first to be afraid. Would Li Hongyuan be afraid of such an opponent? Li Hongyuan maintained this posture for as long as a quarter of an hour. He waved his hand and let them all leave. He glanced at Qing Ju, who was kneeling on the ground as if she had nothing to live for. Take her away and lock her up, wait for Wang Fei's punishment. After all, she was one of Jingwan's people and had served by Jingwan's side for many years. Li Hongyuan wouldn't easily punish her. This was his respect and love for Jingwan. Although, he knew that when the time came, there was an 8 or 9 out of 10 chance that Jingwan wouldn't do anything to Qing Ju. Probably also understanding this point, He Mei and the others slightly breathed a sigh of relief. If Wang Ye punished her, there was an 8 or 9 out of 10 chance that Qing Ju would die. Not knowing wasn't a reason to exempt her from the crime. Qing Ju, on the other hand, didn't have any happy reaction. At this moment, she was surrounded by deep regret and self-blame. From her point of view, it was her fault. It was all her fault that she had harmed the princess consort. The princess consort was still pregnant with a child. If the child was also implicated. If it wasn't for the hope that the princess consort would definitely wake up, Qing Ju might have already used her death as an apology. As for Qing Yi, the sweetness of her young maiden's heart was as much as the hatred for him now. What she hated the most was not that he used her, but that he used her to hurt Wang Fei. If he only wanted to get some benefits from her, she might be a little sad in the end. Jingwan was Li Hongyuan's reverse scale, but for some other people, she was also important. Qing Yi was interrogated again. This time, she really didn't look like a human. She looked like a pile of rotten meat that was barely holding on to the shape of a human. Master, there's a high chance that this actress was also drugged, so we couldn't interrogate her. Perhaps because he was mentally prepared, Li Hongyuan didn't flare up. Get ready. We'll go to White Dragon Temple tomorrow morning. Yes. When the city gates opened the next day, Li Hongyuan left the capital with his men in a grandiose manner. In the morning court, Li Hongyuan was naturally impeached again. Regardless of how Lu Qingdi would deal with it, he had injured the city gate guards and used his horse to injure people in the city. He couldn't avoid being impeached. Lu Qingdi also had a headache. That evil spawn clearly hadn't caused any trouble for a long time. How did this happen again? No matter how much he favored this son, since the impeachment report came, he couldn't ignore it. At least on the surface, he had to put on an act. However, when he sent someone to Jin Qinhuang Fu after the court meeting, he was informed that Jin Qinhuang had left the capital. The people of the Wangfu took a lot of people away. It seemed that he wouldn't return after going out for a stroll. Speaking of which, in the past, when he left the capital, he would at least report to him. This time, he actually left without a word. Lu Qingdi was so angry that he almost flipped the table. He kept scolding, "Evil spawn, evil spawn." As for those brothers of Li Hongyuan, even if Lu Qingdi didn't like them, they didn't spare any effort to add oil and vinegar to Lu Qingdi's eyes. After all, only by removing Li Hongyuan, the biggest obstacle, other people's chances would be equal. Therefore, they didn't put Father Emperor in their eyes, failed to live up to Father Emperor's love and care for him, had no regard for law and discipline, and in the long run, it might cause people's resentment and so on. These words might really add fuel to the fire. However, when Li Hongyuan wasn't here, the unlucky ones were naturally those who jumped around in front of him. Lu Qingdi's anger couldn't be extinguished, but he also knew that his son couldn't have left the capital for no reason. Even yesterday's incident might have a reason. Therefore, he let people investigate first. However, when he sent people to Jin Qinhuang Fu to inquire, he didn't get any results. Because all the insiders in the Wang Fu were taken away by Li Hongyuan. No matter who it was, to be able to get Gong Zhou's medicine and be able to cause trouble in the Wang Fu, it couldn't be just an ordinary servant. Even with Qing Yi as an example, this kind of situation was rare. It should be known that even in the Wang Fu, there were only a few people who knew about the guard rotation. Therefore, this person must not be so transparent. Therefore, Li Hongyuan was 100% sure that this person must be among the people he took away. At this time, if he left him and the Wang Fu together, who knew what other things would happen? It was better to keep him under his nose. He wouldn't leave Jingwan's side at all times. What else could happen? He didn't need to think about anything else and could just directly commit suicide. However, in this world, was there really someone who could do this? Li Hongyuan didn't need to send people to Bai Long Temple to inquire about Master Liao Chen's whereabouts. The last time Master Liao Chen came to the capital, after the Imperial Gui Fei appeared, the King of Hell clearly told him that he hoped that Master Liao Chen wouldn't be wandering in the short term. Master Liao Chen was a supreme expert, but because of pity for the common people, he was suppressed by Li Hongyuan. He was helpless enough. Chapter 561. When Master Liao Chen learned that the King of Hell had come to visit, he said Buddha and didn't seem surprised. Or rather, he was calm about everything. He continued to knock on the wooden fish and recite sutras, waiting for someone to come. Li Hongyuan did indeed carry Jingwan to Master Liao Chen's meditation room. His room was in the deepest part of White Dragon Temple. In other words, they had to pass through the entire temple. There were many onlookers along the way, and some even came to offer incense. It was a disgrace to this peaceful place of Buddhism. However, regardless of whether they knew of Li Hongyuan's identity, no one dared to stop them. White Dragon Temple didn't lack visitors throughout the year. The nobles who saw this scene couldn't help but be surprised and puzzled. What was wrong with Jin Qin Wang Fei? Li Hongyuan carried Jingwan to Master Liaochen's room while the others stayed outside. Two novice monks came out of the room. Facing Li Hongyuan, they put their palms together and bowed slightly, saying, Amitabha. Then they turned and left Li Hongyuan's side. Master Liaochen's room originally only had a bed, a cabinet, a table, and prayer mats. Usually, there were only two. There were no chairs. But now, there was a small couch with a clean mattress. It was obvious who it was prepared for. He couldn't sit on the prayer mat with Jingwan in his arms. Thus, Li Hongyuan put Jingwan down, tidied his clothes and hair, and then knelt down on the prayer mat in front of Master Liaochen. He was calm and composed, his movements smooth and pleasing to the eye. However, when Master Liaochen met Li Hongyuan's eyes, which were full of negative emotions, he sighed inwardly. When Li Hongyuan first came to him, he had tried his best to resolve his hostility. Unfortunately, it didn't work. Everything was about cause and effect, and some things couldn't be forced. Although he didn't know the specific origin of the hostility, he had a general idea. Master Liaochen's gaze swept over Jingwan. Amitabha. The one who tied the bell should untie it. However, many things were not so idealistic. The road you idealized might be the stumbling block of others. You had to find a way to get rid of it or stop it. Therefore, the actions of others would become the obstacles under your feet. The road would become bumpy, and there might be many forks in the road. One of them would probably lead to a dead end. It all depended on one's path. Of course, luck was also important. Master, do you have a solution? Master Liaochen's SS room. No solution. Even if he was facing a demon king, one wrong word could make him flip out. Master Liaochen didn't lie, nor did he give a half-hearted answer. He did what he had to do. Li Hongyuan's expression didn't change. He didn't seem surprised by the answer. Wan, you'll be fine, right? Li Hongyuan had always been calm and collected. Even if something out of his control happened, he wouldn't panic. He could also afford to lose. If he suffered a loss, he would find a way to get it back. However, the main premise was that Jingwan wasn't involved. If Jingwan was involved, he would feel uneasy and unsure. He would need someone to comfort him. Even if it was a lie, he was willing to accept it. Master Liaochen only said, Buddha. He didn't say anything else. It wasn't clear whether this meant that something was unspeakable, or that he wasn't sure about Jingwan's safety. Li Hongyuan's expression didn't change. His earlier uneasiness didn't appear at all. This prince will be leaving for a while. I'll have to trouble you to look after Wan. Li Hongyuan had come here with hope in Master Liaochen, but he hadn't placed all his hopes on him. Now that he had an answer, he naturally had to think of another way. He had been prepared to keep Jingwan by his side no matter what he did, but now he changed his mind. He might not trust others, including Mama Gong, but Master Liaochen was worthy of his trust. He believed that Jingwan would be safe in Master Liaochen's monastery. Master Liaochen's ability was unfathomable in Li Hongyuan's eyes. Those ghosts and monsters wouldn't work here. Most importantly, Li Hongyuan knew Master Liaochen's weakness. He didn't want to lose his mind and start a large-scale war. He also knew that the thread of reason was in Jingwan's hands. Master Liaochen would probably risk his life to protect Jingwan if anything happened. In other words, his trust wasn't based on Master Liaochen's personality, but on his ability and weakness. Li Hongyuan didn't care whether Master Liaochen was scheming or treacherous. He didn't care how prestigious Master Liaochen was outside. Perhaps he was already used to Li Hongyuan's way of doing things. Amitabha. If your highness doesn't mind, this humble monk can take care of her highness for a while. However, your highness should act quickly. This humble monk can only protect her highness for 3 months at most. Even if Master Liaochen was an otherworldly expert, he was still a human, not a god. 3 months of starvation was the limit. Li Hongyuan nodded. That's enough. This prince will take his leave now. If nothing had happened to Jingwan, Li Hongyuan wouldn't have minded remaining passive. He could take the initiative one day when he got impatient. But now, he couldn't just sit around and wait for death. Li Hongyuan looked at Jingwan for a moment. Her heartbeat, pulse, and breathing were clearly there, but she didn't respond to his calls. Li Hongyuan had been like a pool of stagnant water because of his strong self-control. Now, he was boiling and bubbling, filling the air with melancholy. Master Liaochen saw this and only twirled his prayer beads, silently chanting scriptures. Li Hongyuan put his hand on Jingwan's belly. The little one in her belly moved obediently. Li Hongyuan had liked this since yesterday. Although the child didn't respond every time, it did respond more often than usual. The little thing he didn't like was his only consolation. He took it as Jingwan's response. Li Hongyuan missed Jingwan dearly, but when it came to leaving, he was decisive. In the yard, Li Hongyuan did not stop walking. He left directly. Bodyguard Qian, Gong Zhou, and the other secret guards followed him silently without hesitation. Granny Gong and the others naturally stayed behind. Later, Master Liaochen ordered people to clean up the meditation room next door. It would be Jingwan's resting place. Li Hongyuan had prepared a lot of things before he came. Although it wasn't a complete set, he had brought everything Jingwan used every day. Therefore, the meditation room was completely changed. No one would think it was a meditation room just by looking at it. Master Liaochen had seen it but didn't say anything. He had always been generous and benevolent. As long as it didn't violate any of the Buddhist rules, he would be very tolerant. Master Liaochen came and put something in Jingwan's hand. The princess doesn't need to eat for the next 3 months. Since there was no need to eat, there would naturally be no physiological problems, and the body's functions would be reduced to the lowest. However, Master, our princess consort is pregnant now. If we do this, will it affect the child? Amitabha. This is inevitable. Now that mother and child are one, if the mother doesn't eat, the child can't grow. If it continues to grow, it will consume the mother's body. At that time, the princess will be in danger. Of course, the relic will also affect the child, but it won't affect the mother's body. The child's growth will be much slower. If there are no problems in the later stages, the child will be born 2 months later. Even so, the mother will quickly lose weight. The best way is for the princess to wake up as soon as possible. Granny Gong clenched her fists. Master, can you read our princess's fortune? In fact, Granny Gong knew that the prince had already done it when he was still alive. Master Liaochen shook his head. Amitabha, this poor monk can't. In Master Liaochen's eyes, Jingwan's fate was very messy. Because she was from another world, and because Jin Qinhuang had changed her fate, perhaps there really was a tribulation in her life. Once this tribulation was over, her fate would probably smooth out. Granny Gong thought that perhaps the outcome would be very bad, but she didn't expect that it couldn't be read. How could it be that even Master Liaochen couldn't read it? She, who had always been calm and composed, was so shocked that she couldn't speak. Chapter 562. Your Highness is a kind and benevolent person will be blessed by heaven. Anyway, it was Master Liaochen's consolation, which was more or less useful. But it was limited. As long as Jingwan didn't wake up, Gong Mingya would be worried. Although Li Hongyuan didn't say what he was going to do, Nanny Gong could basically guess it. Nanny Gong only hoped that everything would go well for him and that he would come back as soon as possible. But she knew that it was impossible for everything to go well. There would be many twists and turns in the process, and it might even be very dangerous. After all, those people had done everything possible to set up such a trap. How could they let him escape so easily? Although they didn't say it explicitly, in fact, everyone knew that in essence, they were targeting the prince. It was very likely that they wanted to lure him out of the capital city of Qiyuan. What they wanted was probably his life. However, even though he knew it was a hopeless situation, Li Hongyuan still stepped into it without hesitation. After all, those people did have his lifeline. To deal with a person, it was common sense to have his lifeline. Especially for a person like Li Hongyuan, who was so powerful that he couldn't be shaken, his weak spot might be the only way to deal with him. From the beginning, they had expected this. Li Hongyuan arranged the most complete guards around Jingwan. However, there were always so many unknowns and accidents in the world, which could be said to be impossible to guard against. Therefore, it was not only Jingwan who was worrying. To some extent, Li Hongyuan was more dangerous than her. Nanny Gong put a small bed next to Jingwan's bed. She had to sleep with her at night. Although she didn't have any physical needs, it didn't mean that she didn't have to care about anything. She had to wipe her body, massage her, wash her hair regularly, and move out of the room to see the sunlight. In this way, it lasted for a day or two. In the capital city, Luqingdi's people came to find her. Although Li Hongyuan brought a lot of people with him, they were fast enough. In fear of the living hell, no one dared to question them. Outside the city, even if ordinary people saw them, they would stay far away from them. In this way, Luqingdi's people didn't find out where Li Hongyuan and his people went in a short time. It was because the noblewoman who went to the White Dragon Temple to offer incense accidentally mentioned it to her family, and then reported it to Luqingdi. This time, no matter how one looked at it, it was unusual. Li Hongyuan's quick action showed the seriousness and urgency of the matter. In fact, some people knew how much of a scoundrel Li Hongyuan was. It was not as exaggerated as the rumors said. He had a sense of propriety and would not cross the bottom line. This time, it could only be said that something had really happened, something big. When the Luo family knew that Li Hongyuan took Jingwan out of the capital city with him, it was inevitable that they would think more. Especially the two elders, who knew more than others, almost subconsciously thought that this matter had something to do with Jingwan. Madame Luo couldn't sit still. When she knew that they might still be in the White Dragon Temple, she immediately sent people there. Therefore, she was only a little behind Luqingdi's people. It was completely expected that these people would come to the White Dragon Temple. Therefore, Granny Gong had already thought of a way to deal with them. Ordinary people couldn't know about Jingwan's current situation. Even if they knew, they wouldn't dare to say it, because the living hell would definitely think that they were behind it. Even the 9 Lives demon cat didn't have the ability to fight with the living hell in the capital city. So, Wang Fei suddenly had an unknown illness. The doctors in the mansion couldn't do anything about it. In a hurry, His Highness came to the White Dragon Temple to ask Master Liaochen for help. Fortunately, Master Liaochen knew the reason, but the medicine used was very rare. This time, His Highness personally led people to look for the medicine. Granny Gong wasn't worried that the lie would be exposed because Master Liaochen was still there. He definitely wouldn't expose the matter. With him, Luqingdi's people wouldn't suspect anything. Master Liaochen was a person of virtue and prestige. No one would think that he would lie. The people behind the scenes might know that Master Liaochen treated Li Hongyuan differently through this matter. However, they couldn't do anything about it. In fact, it was quite stupid to go against Master Liaochen. The gains didn't make up for the losses. Besides, monks didn't lie. However, Master Liaochen didn't need to say anything. In his monastery, no one would be stupid enough to ask him for confirmation. Speaking of which, even if he revealed something afterwards, it would at most be Granny Gong using the tiger's skin as a banner. It would have nothing to do with Master Liaochen himself. The people who came were easily sent away. Even if some people suspected that something was wrong, they couldn't find Li Hongyuan. Jingwan was in a deep sleep. Master Liaochen said that it was better for her to stay in the White Dragon Temple. No one dared to take her away. It didn't matter what the others thought. However, the Luo family wasn't so easy to send away. Especially when Madame Luo came to the White Dragon Temple a day later and sat beside Jingwan. Tell me what happened. You'd better not fool me. Granny Gong knew how important Jingwan was to Madame Luo. Madame Luo's health had improved a little in the past few years. However, she had been seriously ill and had almost died. Therefore, she still needed to be very careful in all aspects. No one knew what the outcome of this matter would be. Granny Gong was hesitant. Madame Luo had sharp eyes. Tell me. I can still take it. Granny Gong slowly exhaled and sent the others away. Although they all knew what happened to the princess, there were more inside stories that they didn't know. In front of Madame Luo, they had to tell her everything. This was also the way to convey the current situation to the Minister of Official Personnel Affairs. When the prince wasn't in the capital, they needed someone to stabilize the situation in the capital. They couldn't allow an unmanageable situation to arise during this time. Granny Gong stood in front of Madame Luo and explained the cause and effect clearly. Even the details, including the possible situation that Jingwan and the child in her belly might face, were clear. There was no need for Madame Luo to ask. Madame Luo's face remained calm from beginning to end. After listening, she turned to look at Jingwan. There was worry in her eyes, but she didn't lose her composure. She reached out and carefully placed her hand on Jingwan's belly. Her heart ached. Jingwan had been in front of her since she was a few years old. She watched her grow up little by little. There was no one more considerate than this child. Even if she loved her to the bone, it wouldn't be an exaggeration. The Luo family might not be the top wealthy family, but they had never let her suffer. And after she got married, her husband was especially pampered, which made her calm temperament become a bit more delicate. As her paternal grandmother, of course she was happy to see it. Originally, Luo Lao Furen's only worry was what would happen if Jin Qinwang had a change of heart in the future. But she didn't expect that at this juncture, such a disaster would happen, and even life and death would be hard to predict. According to what you said, the prince is going to southern Qi. In response to Madame Luo, it is most likely so. Even if he had brought people with him, it was no different from him going alone into the enemy country. In this situation where there was no official letter of exchange, if he was discovered, the consequences would be unimaginable. Moreover, the people in power in southern Qi might not have known that he had poisoned his own granddaughter. If it was all planned, then they would be waiting for him to go. Even if southern Qi wanted to make a move against the royal family of Qi Yuan, they shouldn't have chosen Prince Jin as their target. Unless the prince's secret power has been exposed. Even so, logically speaking, southern Qi should have thought of a way to bring this matter to the emperor, or to drive a wedge between the other princes, to disrupt the internal affairs of Qi Yuan, and then reap the benefits. But now, they have lured him out of Qi Yuan's capital. This doesn't make sense. Madame Luo, based on the prince's current power, the emperor can't suppress him, and the other princes can't defeat him. If we wait until the prince succeeds, he will be a threat to other countries. The best way is to get rid of him before the prince completely grasps the situation. Although Madame Luo knew that Li Hongyuan's power was very strong, she didn't think that it was strong to this extent. Even her own master didn't fully know. So, the person who brought the prince's power to southern Qi must have a thorough understanding of the prince's situation. Is he a spy or a traitor? Gong Mama frowned slightly. It shouldn't be either. Gong Mama's words weren't without purpose. If the other party had a thorough understanding of the prince's situation, perhaps they wouldn't have done such a thing so easily. The consequences of thoroughly angering the prince were truly unbearable. In addition, the people who knew His Highness's situation the most should be the few hidden guards around him. These people were basically in charge of a certain area. Therefore, other than His Highness, and perhaps Her Highness, no one knew everything about His Highness. What do you mean? Madame Luo looked at Gong Mama with slight confusion. I'm more inclined to think that the person has some understanding of the prince, but in his heart, he knows that this is only the tip of the iceberg, so he is extremely afraid of the prince. But this estimate was far from enough. Madame Luo nodded. Now that she put it this way, it made sense. After that, the room fell into a long silence. Madame Luo sat there quietly for nearly 2 hours. You must take good care of your mistress. In a few days, I'll come again. After all, she had been through a lot. It was also at this time that Madame Luo became more rational. She knew that it was useless to stay by Jingwan's side now, so she might as well return to the capital. Other than passing on what she had learned today to her master, she also wanted to do her part. In the past few years, Madame Luo didn't like to go out because there was no need. Now, it was time for her to go out. Never underestimate the seemingly insignificant things in a noble house. What Madame Luo knew now told her that the commotion in Qiyuan should be over soon, perhaps after her grandson-in-law returned. Although the trip to the southern Qi kingdom was dangerous, she didn't think that Li Hongyuan would fall there. In the following days, even if she moved more frequently, even if some people were suspicious of her, it didn't matter. The Luo family's current power was there. It was impossible to topple the Luo family in a short period of time. Moreover, the Luo family had a powerful alliance that helped each other. Even if someone wanted to overturn the situation during this period of time, it wouldn't be so easy. Gong Mama didn't know about the change in Madame Luo's heart, and she didn't need to know. The best way to help was to do their jobs well. Acting without authorization would only disrupt the overall situation. That night, as usual, Gong Mama gave Jingwan a full-body treatment. Her eyes couldn't help but fall on Jingwan's belly. These days, she had stayed by Jingwan's side almost all the time. The little master had only moved slightly once. Perhaps she had noticed it, but even if she added up all the times, it still wouldn't reach the number of times she had moved in one day. Gong Mama could only check her pulse again and again to make sure that Jingwan was keeping up with the child. This kind of situation, to a certain extent, was quite torturous. Ever since Jingwan's accident, Gong Mama's vigilance had been raised to 120%. She always slept very lightly. The slightest sound would wake her up. Tonight, Gong Mama slept very soundly. The sound of footsteps sounded in the courtyard. It didn't sound light or heavy. It was like a normal person walking at a steady pace. With a creak, the door was pushed open. Although it was not the 15th day of the lunar month, under the night sky without any clouds or fog, the moonlight was not bad. Through the door, a vague shadow was drawn. The shadow didn't stop. Step by step, it walked to Jingwan. Then, it took out a small luminous pearl to illuminate the area. It took off the Buddhist prayer beads around Jingwan's wrist. When Jingwan first went to the White Dragon Temple, Li Hongyuan asked Master Liaochen for it. It untied the knot of the Buddhist prayer beads, took out one of them, and put the same beads on it from the purse at its waist. It took off the Buddhist prayer beads, put it back into the purse, and made an excuse. After making sure that it was the same as the original one, it was put back on Jingwan's wrist. Chapter 563. Finishing everything, he left the meditation room and closed the door. Just as he was about to leave, he heard a Buddhist chant, Amitabha. It made him pause for a moment. However, he did not show any signs of panic. He looked in the direction of the voice, squatted down, and bowed politely. Master. Amitabha Buddha, for benefactor to visit in the middle of the night, what is benefactor's purpose? There was a moment of silence, followed by a soft chuckle. In this world, no one can compare to Great Master when it comes to the heart as clear as a mirror. Great Master should know that I have no ill intentions, at least towards Wang Fei. Amitabha Buddha. Great Master Liao Qin twirled his Buddhist prayer beads and didn't say anything else. Great Master is a person outside of worldly affairs and doesn't easily get involved in worldly affairs. It's just that Great Master's heart cares for the common people and sympathizes with the common people. In the end, you can't completely walk outside of worldly affairs, so to a certain extent, you got involved in this matter. However, this is actually quite good. No matter what you think of Jin Qin Wang in your heart, or your purpose in helping him, Wang Fei is innocent. She shouldn't be involved in this bloody game, so this is really quite good. Great Master Liao Qin had a benevolent countenance. It was unknown how old he was, but in this world, no one would dare to say that he was number 2. This kind of person, with a healthy body, clear eyes, and even under the dim moonlight, he could still see the other person clearly. In the end, there were only a few people in the world whose fate lines were messed up. This was a pitiful person. It's late at night and the dew is heavy. Benefactor should go back and rest early. Amitabha Buddha. Many thanks to Great Master. Knowing that tonight's matter, Great Master Liao Qin had let it go. How he came, how he left. His gait didn't change and he didn't deliberately hide his head. He was very magnanimous. Great Master Liao Qin looked at the meditation room Jingwan was in for a moment before walking over. His footsteps really didn't make any sound. He didn't need to borrow anything and walked to Jingwan's side accurately. He reached out to check her pulse. If his guess was correct, she should wake up in 3 days. His gaze fell on the prayer beads on Jingwan's wrist. Others couldn't see it, but in his eyes, the change in the prayer beads was clear at a glance. It was as if a purple bead with a black color had appeared in the middle of a pair of golden beads. Although the color seemed a bit unknown, Great Master Liao Qin could sense that this bead was harmless and could solve the problem of Jin Qin Wang Fei. The human heart, right and wrong, the twists and turns. Great Master Liao Qin brushed his sleeves and left the meditation room. The door closed automatically and the room seemed to have changed invisibly. Mama Gong stirred and then abruptly woke up. She frowned and got up to light the lamp. First, she checked Jingwan's condition. From head to toe, she didn't miss a thing. Then she turned around and carefully looked at the windows, door, and some other details. She didn't find anything wrong, but based on her former shadow guard's intuition, she couldn't relax. Then, Granny Gong opened the door and looked around. There was no problem, but she couldn't get rid of the strange feeling. Mama Gong couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. When the person who returned to his room from Jingwan's room entered the room, he was shocked to find someone in the room. In reality, it wasn't a pleasant feeling, but he didn't make a sound. He looked at the person standing motionless by the bed. Even under the moonlight, the person didn't have the slightest temperament of the moonlight. Instead, he was so gloomy that the moonlight outside paled in comparison. He didn't look like a living person, and it was very unpleasant. He didn't speak, and she didn't speak either. It's so late. Why did you go find her? The scene seemed to be going on forever. The person standing by the window finally opened his mouth. His voice was a little hoarse, but it was not the kind of voice that sounded like he was not fully awake or deliberately lowering his voice. Instead, it sounded more like his vocal cords had been damaged. It sounded a little harsh to the ears. The Wang Fei is the mistress. It's normal for her to stay up all night. But you're not trusted now. Everyone else was implicated. You're the main culprit. The woman sneered. We're the same. Neither of us is a good person. But speaking of which, you're quite bold to come here at this time. Did you really think that His Highness took away all the good men? No matter what the truth was, the fact that he could stand here was already the best explanation. The person by the window tilted his head slightly. Under the faint moonlight, his eyes were clear and terrifying. Not only that, there seemed to be something wriggling on his sunken face. It was enough to give people goosebumps. The woman's expression changed slightly. You're really disgusting. Perhaps it was not the first time that he had been looked at or spoken to in such a way, but he didn't react at all. Perhaps his calm attitude angered her. I don't know how the Wang Fei will react when she sees you like this. Will she be frightened or disgusted? Out of 10 people, at least 9 of them would see you as a scourge, and the remaining one would have fainted at the first moment. Finally, there was a change of emotion in his eyes. He was not a beast, but a yiksha. However, he didn't do anything in the end. No one knew whether he was too lazy to care or disheartened. He threw the thing in his hand over. The thing inside can remove the sleeping bug. Take her out of White Dragon Temple in 3 days. You really think highly of me. It's already very difficult to put the sleeping bug on the Wang Fei. Now Nanny Gong doesn't allow any of us to get close to her. How can you remove the sleeping bug on the Wang Fei under her nose? Do you want me to expose myself directly? We haven't crossed the river yet. Are you ready to burn the bridge? The woman held the porcelain bottle in her hand and said lightly. That's your business. If you can't do it, what's the use of having you? Aren't you afraid that I'll bite all of you out? The person in front of the window sneered. Li Hongyuan can come back. You don't have to say anything. We won't have a good ending. He's dead. No matter how much you say, it won't help. It turns out that in your eyes, His Highness still has a chance to live. I thought you were very careful and set up a fatal trap. Speaking of which, I really think highly of you. This has nothing to do with you. You just need to do your own thing. With a flick of his sleeve, he brushed past the woman and strode away. After the silence returned, the woman casually threw away the porcelain bottle in her hand and sat down on a simple wooden chair. She rested her chin on one hand. Compared to the indignation and mockery she had before, she had completely calmed down. In the darkness, her mind drifted. Those people all treated her as the mud on the ground. They could step on her however they wanted. And she had to follow the path they arranged. There was no freedom, no dignity, and no sense of self. In Jin Qin Wang Fu, it was actually her happiest time. She didn't need to greet people and send them off. She didn't need to sell her smile. Most of the people in the Fu were respectful and flattering because she was Wang Fei's personal servant. And those who knew her identity, even if they didn't trust her that much and put her out of many things, they never looked down on her. She had a lot of silver on her and should be the wealthiest person among all the cheap people. When she got it in her hands, she hesitated. Aunt May was in the flesh business, so why did she treat her differently? It was fine if she delayed the reception time, but before she left, she even gave her a lot of silver, saying that it was the money she had sold herself for. If her days in the Fu were not broken, she might really be grateful to Aunt May for the rest of her life. When Wang Fei and the others were still in the northwest, suddenly one day, someone came to her door and told her a story. Her father was a shadow guard who was carefully groomed by others, and her mother was just an ordinary woman. When they walked together, they were not blessed by anyone. The reason why she could live until she was a few years old in front of her parents was because her father risked his life on one dangerous mission after another. Her mother was similarly stuck in the mud and struggled bitterly. And these were still far from enough. They never raised a useless person, and from that time, she was deliberately groomed as a chess piece, in a situation that she was completely unaware of. Blood pools and mud, wails and cries everywhere, starving people all over the mountains. Her closest relatives were not there. Following her mother's dying words, she must live. Alone and without anyone to rely on, she struggled bitterly, suffered all kinds of humiliation, and fell into the dust of a prostitute. These were all part of the process of grooming her. When it was about time, it was time for her to play a role. Only, she was so lucky that she entered Jin Qin Wang Fu without any effort from those people. They said that the reason why Jin Qin Wang Fei kept her was because she first protected Jin Qin Wang Fei's servant girls. Therefore, she did not owe Jin Qin Wang Fei anything. To be able to serve master was an honor that a lowly person like her could not ask for. Her miserable fate was all created by them, but now she still had to work for them. How laughable. She had no way to refuse because her parents were still alive. There were some things that she had to do. If she did not have any memories of them, perhaps it would not matter. However, her memories of them were very deep, very deep. Because of those deeply engraved memories, it made her suspect that it was actually done deliberately. She was too young and did not have the ability to judge, so she easily thought that they were good, very good. She even suspected that they were not her parents at all. Everything was a means to control people. Suspicion was suspicion, but feeling still held the upper hand. As for whether they were really still alive, she did not dare to gamble. It was just that people like them were born to be pinched. If they wanted to pinch flat, they would be pinched flat. If they wanted to roll, they would be rolled round. In the darkness, Fu Rong revealed a strange smile. Speaking of which, Jin Qin Wang was alone. Southern Qi still needed this kind of treacherous and unpredictable thing like goo. They actually had to find the former way to work together to deal with it. Jin Qin Wang was too powerful, and these people were too useless. Just as Master Liaochen had predicted, Jingwan really did wake up 3 days later. Gong Mama almost cried tears of joy. Chapter 564. Half an hour after Jingwan had her meal, the child in her belly also became active. Perhaps it was because it had been holding it in for too long, but now it was a little too active. In fact, it was a little uncomfortable, but Jingwan showed a rare smile. After Granny Gong's initial joy, she realized a problem. Since someone had tried so hard to put the sleeping spell on the princess consort, then the sleeping spell would not lose its effect after a while. Who was the one who removed the sleeping spell? And it had happened right under her nose. It was very likely that this person was the one who had used Xing Yi as a tool but was not caught. Now, this person had done something similar again. How could she tolerate it? Nurse Gong suddenly thought of the first few nights. Her intuition told her that something was wrong, but in reality, she did not notice anything strange. So, was it really that night? Nurse Gong did not show it on her face, but her heart was terrifyingly gloomy. The first time, it could be attributed to carelessness because of the tight security. What about the second time? What should she do? She could indeed say that she was incompetent. Nurse Gong was not angry because she had been provoked again and again. It was mainly because this situation was completely out of her control. She felt that it was very troublesome. She was afraid that something would go wrong at some unknown time. In reality, it was not a matter of when something would go wrong. It was a matter of letting the princess wake up at this time. It was a big problem. Nanny Gong looked at everyone with a scrutinizing gaze. She became more and more cautious in her actions. Not only was she careful about Jingwan's food and clothing, she was also very careful about her own. Because now, she was almost certain that she had fallen into a trap that night. If she wanted to protect her master, she had to first prevent herself from getting into trouble. Another doubt arose in Nurse Gong's heart. The prince thought that Master Liaochen's place was safe enough to let the princess stay and took away all the secret guards. But how could this situation be explained? Nurse Gong, is there something wrong? Granny Gong hesitated for a moment. Judging from the princess consort's attitude after she woke up, she should not be unaware of the current situation. Logically speaking, everything happened after she fell asleep, so she should not be aware of it. Then, it could only mean that either the princess consort had sensed something before the incident, or she was actually aware of the outside world during this period of time, but just could not wake up. Jingwan did not speak again, obviously waiting for the other party to take the initiative to explain. Granny Gong had been by Jingwan's side for 5 or 6 years. She knew that Jingwan's mind was actually very clear. She had seen and understood a lot of things. Even if she didn't say it out loud, it didn't mean that she didn't know. Even if he told her everything now, especially that His Highness had entered the tiger's den, she might not be able to bear it. However, if he didn't tell her, would Her Highness not be worried? Sometimes, the unknown would cause people to let their imaginations run wild, even to the point of fear. If they knew, they might even come up with a good idea. In the end, Mama Gong told Jingwan everything that had happened. Jingwan was calmer than Nanny Gong had expected. From the beginning to the end, not to mention her expression, even the look in her eyes did not change. Wang Fei, are you, Jingwan raised her head and immediately understood what Nanny Gong meant. She shook her head and said, Nanny, I've been regarded as Prince's weakness. She stated a fact in a low voice. Wang Fei, that's not the case. You and His Highness, Nanny, you don't have to say that. I know what I'm doing. Don't worry. I won't let my imagination run wild. Jingwan knew her situation better than anyone else. Therefore, even if she was worried and anxious, she had better not act on her own. Otherwise, not only would she not be able to help, but she would also cause trouble. Wasn't there a lot of similar plots in the TV series and movies in her previous life? Although many of those things were required by the plot and had some artistic elements in them, it was absolutely possible in reality. Therefore, it was important to know one's own limits sometimes. Therefore, Jingwan's current situation was somewhat similar to Li Hongyuan's when she fell into a deep sleep. The more worried and anxious she was, the more she forced herself to be calm and rational. Seeing Jingwan's reaction, Nanny Gong was both happy and worried. However, it was much better than her going to look for His Highness recklessly. Later, Nanny Gong told Nanny Gong about the person who made her suddenly wake up and her suspicion of Master Liaochen. You're overthinking Master Liaochen's words. After all, that person wants me to wake up, not harm me. Plus, masters aren't people of this world. They care about karma and reincarnation. They won't interfere rashly. It's already not easy for them to stay here temporarily. I can't force anything more. As for the rest, Mama, have everyone wait outside and come in one by one. I have something to ask. Nanny Gong knew that Nanny Gong had a plan, so she didn't say more and did as Nanny Gong said. Now, the servants serving Jingwan were basically those who served her closely in Prince Yu's mansion. In addition, there was Eunuch Mu, who was regarded as a burden by Li Hongyuan and didn't take him away. There weren't many of them. They asked one question after another. It was more like a private chat between the master and the servants than an inquiry. It was a very casual kind. Except for one person, the others didn't have any purpose. When Fu Rong appeared in front of Jingwan put down the teacup in her hand, which was specially prepared for her by Nanny Gong. She looked at Fu Rong. In fact, she was almost the same as before. She was born a prostitute, but she didn't have the slightest trace of a prostitute's aura. Originally, she thought that she was not fated to meet a procuress who treated her well. Now that she thought about it, she was still too naive. However, even if there was no such thing, and Fu Rong was deliberately cultivated, then presumably, she would be sent to some people by all means. However, under normal circumstances, it shouldn't be her husband. Did she invite a wolf into the house? Jingwan was a little self-deprecating. Fu Rong, what do you want to say to me? Having said that, Jingwan still felt that Fu Rong was a little strange. In fact, before she had the accident, she didn't think of such a thing. But after she woke up, she thought about it and basically determined the target. But she felt that Fu Rong was deliberately reminding her. After all, she had been very normal before and didn't show any clues. If she was the only one who noticed it, other people also didn't notice it. It was enough to show that there was no clue. But what was the purpose of her doing so? Did she think that she was brave because of her skill and that the end of the matter would develop as she planned? Did she deliberately provoke her? Or did she mean to remind her? Your Highness, you've given me a new life. Fu Rong, you're too serious. At that time, you saved Bai Xiao first. I just let you stay by my side. It's not a big deal. Moreover, even if I didn't help, you would jump out of the fire pit sooner or later. Jingwan interrupted her calmly. Your Highness, do you really think it will be like this? Without Princess Consort's shelter, this servant would have been humiliated and changed hands again and again. This servant would have become an insignificant plaything that anyone could trample on. Princess Consort's slight effort is the grace of giving this servant a new lease of life. Fu Rong stood upright with slightly lowered eyebrows and narrowed eyes. It was a very standard posture, the posture of a qualified maid in a noble courtyard. Jingwan was silent. She wanted to ask, in this case, are you biting the hand that feeds you? But she didn't ask, because it was meaningless. Why did you wake me up? Someone doesn't want your Highness to stay in White Dragon Temple anymore. Fu Rong told her the truth. Oh. They have His Highness's weakness. Can't they do anything to him? When Jingwan said this, she was a little proud. Look, this was her man. No matter what they did, they still couldn't hurt him. His Highness is a wise man. Ordinary people can't be compared with him. If they want to take him down, they naturally need more bargaining chips. So, it's not surprising. So, the fact that I'm awake now can't be spread to him anyway. More than that. In fact, if you don't leave White Dragon Temple, His Highness can't come back, at least not within 3 months. Your Highness, you have more than one kind of poisonous insect. Another kind of poisonous insect can really control His Highness. Chapter 565. So, this was a chain of events, and everything had been planned long ago. First, she was put to sleep to lure her husband out, because, under normal circumstances, only she could stop his journey. Then, after he went out, he found that things were far from simple. Even if he found a way to solve the sleeping goo, he was bound by another goo in her body. No matter whether her husband was sure or not, he would not act rashly even if he had a trace of doubt about her. And she was woken up by them. She knew that her husband could only have a chance if she showed up. On the other hand, if she showed up, she might become a bargaining chip for someone to threaten her husband again. Under normal circumstances, there was no need to say what choice to make, but those people really grasped the weakness of human nature. However, this deadlock sometimes needed external forces to break. Even if it was an unfavorable factor, it was definitely better than endless delay. So, Jingwan did not even need to think about what choice to make. Can I know what the other goo in my body is? Substitute goo, a very special kind of goo. Fu Rong did not hide and said truthfully. So, I am now a substitute for someone, and that person is very likely to be the person the prince has to face directly. To what extent does this substitute goo substitute? Does it bear the other person's injury or die for the other person? Princess, you are smart, but the substitute goo has not reached such a level. If the person being substituted is injured, the substitute will bear half of the pain, and the duration is the same. If the person being substituted dies, then the substitute will be weak and permanent, and there will be a reduction in lifespan. So, this substitute goo does not seem to be worthy of its name. However, for an insect to achieve such an effect, it was already heaven-defying enough. This kind of thing should not be so easy to raise. How many are there now? Fu Rong was silent. The goo worms come from the southern Qi kingdom, and my parents are from the former Wei kingdom. Jingwan finally showed a surprised expression. She picked up the tea and took a sip. There was no warmth in her eyes as she smiled. Furong, tell me. Should I say that you two joined forces for one person and two countries, or should I be proud to have such an outstanding husband? His Highness should be proud to have a princess like you. Jingwan looked at Fu Rong. It was such an obvious compliment, but in Fu Rong's words, it seemed like she was just saying that the weather was good. Because it was ordinary, it seemed sincere. He was obviously loyal, but he chose to betray her. Jingwan's eyes flashed, but she said, Furong, I still have some doubts. I hope you can answer them for me. Whatever I can say, this servant will definitely tell Princess Consort. From what Fu Rong had said before, it could be seen that the scope of what she could say was far greater than expected. However, it was likely that she would not say the most important thing. I just want to know how you did it. According to the guards of the Wang Fu, if you didn't have the ability, you would have disappeared from the world the moment you made a move. But not only did you do it, you didn't let anyone find out. To a certain extent, you even dragged Gong Jiu down with you. Jingwan paused and lowered her head in thought for a moment. She seemed to have understood something. And, the main point is that you are not afraid of poison. Is it because of your body, or did you use external methods? Replying to Princess Consort, it's external methods. Jingwan nodded. It seems that you took more than one kind of medicine from Gong Jiu. Gong Jiu is a cautious and careful person. He knows how many things he made. Although he may not check every day, after this incident, Gong Jiu should be more cautious in the future. Some things probably won't be taken out casually. Even if he takes it out, he will basically carry it with him. It was simply forcing out the rhythm of obsessive-compulsive disorder. Princess Consort, you're too serious. For some things, it's already very lucky to succeed once. Not to mention that it's impossible to have a second chance. The same method won't work for the second time. Jingwan didn't comment, but she agreed with what Fu Rong said in her heart. For some people, making the same mistake twice was absolutely unforgivable. Either they walked into a dead end, or some very terrible things would breed. Fu Rong. Jingwan's next words might be the real topic. She obviously talked to Fu Rong much longer than other people. When Granny Gong came in, her eyes obviously had a different meaning when she looked at Fu Rong. She had always been relatively calm, but at this time, there was a sharpness in her eyes, as if she was going to cut Fu Rong alive. However, Fu Rong maintained the proper attitude, which was respectful, quiet, and reserved. Princess Consort, did Fu Rong? Jingwan raised her hand slightly to stop Granny Gong from continuing. Don't think too much. Was it something that could be stopped just because she said not to think too much? Jingwan didn't say anything more. She casually gave a few instructions and then went to find Master Liaochen. Jingwan might have called Master Liaochen a fraud in her heart, but in fact, she was very confident in his ability. Perhaps she was an atheist in her previous life, but after experiencing time travel, her husband's rebirth, and even seeing a ghost, she accepted things that couldn't be explained by science. Master Liaochen probably knew that Jingwan was going to visit him, so he had prepared tea. "It's good that you're awake, Princess Consort." Master Liaochen twirled the Buddha beads and smiled warmly. Jingwan also smiled. "This time, I'm also thanking you for your help. Otherwise, His Highness wouldn't know how to deal with it." "Your Highness, you're being too serious. His Highness always has his own ideas. Even without the White Dragon Temple, he would still be able to deal with it properly." Jingwan didn't comment. Even if she could deal with some things well, others would make things easier or save her trouble. Therefore, she couldn't deny the other person's credit. In fact, she couldn't express her gratitude, but she should at least show enough sincerity in her words. However, Jingwan felt that the best way to thank Master Liaochen was that her husband wouldn't cause trouble anymore and wouldn't do terrible things so easily. Jingwan picked up the teacup and took a sip. "I'm here not only to thank you, but also to say goodbye to you. I'm sorry to have disturbed you these days." Master Liaochen didn't seem surprised. It made sense. Even if he couldn't see Jingwan's fate, he could make some guesses from other people. "Have you thought it through, Princess Consort? Let's wait. Perhaps there will be a turn for the better. After all, nothing is more important to His Highness than Princess Consort's safety." "Master, some things have to be done. As the saying goes, if it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, it can't be avoided. If you avoid it this time, you may not be able to avoid it the next time. And if you avoid it, the second disaster may be even more dangerous." "I haven't studied Buddhism, but it should be easy to explain," Jingwan said calmly. Master Liaochen nodded. Just like how he hadn't agreed to be the matchmaker between Jingwan and Li Hongyuan, some things couldn't be left out. If he skipped to a good ending, then other things would arise to make up for the missing part. The smoother things were at first, the more difficult it would be later. One part of the difficulty would increase to 3 parts or even more. In that case, I won't dissuade you. I only wish you a safe trip. Master Liaochen put his palms together and prayed. "If you don't mind, I'll draw 3 safety talismans for you. I couldn't ask for more." "Thank you, Master." No matter what kind of talisman Master Liaochen personally drew, it was all about fate. If those talismans were to fall into the outside world, they would be priceless. Jingwan had already planned. One morning, she took the medicine from Fu Rong and did it herself. Naturally, Nurse Gong wouldn't suspect anything. So the aggrieved and angry Nurse Gong was drugged again. If she knew that it was her master who drugged her again, what kind of expression would she have? But Jingwan was her master, so she couldn't do anything but sulk. There was no way she could get back at her. The amount of medicine Fu Rong stole from Gongzhou was limited. Now there wasn't a single drop left. Except for Nurse Gong, it wasn't difficult for Jingwan to send the others away. Everything was done calmly. With one hand on Fu Rong's arm, it was as if they were taking a stroll. Not long after they left Master Liaochen's meditation room, Sister He blocked their way. "Princess, please let this servant go with you." Obviously, Sister He knew Jingwan's plan. Jingwan sighed in her heart. She miscalculated. 4 of the original 7 maidservants were married. The other maidservants were not valued as much as the original ones. Although they were given first-class rations, they were doing second-class things. As for the remaining 3, Qingju, committed a crime, and was left in the palace. Only Fu Rong and Sister He were left with her. Originally, in Jingwan's opinion, Sister He was all brawn and no brain. Of course, she wasn't brainless. It was just that compared to others, she was weaker in intelligence. She liked martial arts more and planned to spend the rest of her life with martial arts. Jingwan originally thought that it would be fine as long as she left White Dragon Temple. As for what happened after that, she would naturally take care of it as long as Granny Gong woke up because she had left a letter. However, she did not expect to be caught red-handed by Black Sister. She did not know when Black Sister started to pay attention to it. Sister He, this trip is very dangerous. You won't be of any use if you follow me. Instead, you may lose your life. Even if we are of no use, I don't think we will be a burden to you. Princess, you are pregnant now. It will be better to have one more person to take care of you. As for my life, from the moment I served Wang Fei, everything of this servant belongs to Wang Fei. There is nothing to care about. He Mei said calmly. Do you have to follow me? Wherever you go, I will go. Sister He was very determined. Can't I order you to stay? Princess, please forgive me. Special circumstances require special treatment. If I can come back alive, I am willing to be punished. Jingwan had no choice but to agree. If they delayed for a long time, Nanny Gong wouldn't be able to leave when she woke up. Other people might not be able to persuade her to stay, but Nanny Gong could, and she was sure that she could do it. Furong had no more medicine with her, so this was her only chance. Sister He, if possible, try to protect yourself. Sister He was silent. Obviously, she didn't listen to her at all. Jingwan didn't say anything more and continued to walk. Sister He glanced at Fu Rong, who had been quiet all the time, and walked to the other side of Jingwan to be a qualified guardian. Jingwan didn't say anything, and they also maintained absolute silence. Since they wanted to take Jingwan out of the mountain, the carriage was naturally prepared. The horse was just a horse, and the appearance of the carriage was quite ordinary. But after getting on the carriage, Jingwan slightly narrowed her eyes. The comfort in the carriage was almost as good as the carriage that her husband specially prepared for her. To be honest, even if she was very valuable, she was just a bargaining chip and a hostage. As long as she was alive, she was valuable enough. Such good treatment was completely unnecessary. It looked very strange. No matter what she thought in her heart, Jingwan didn't show it on her face. Anyway, in her current situation, it was good to have a comfortable environment. But she didn't know if she would be seriously sick in the carriage, although under normal circumstances, the condition of carriage sickness was very small. Of course, although the carriage was comfortable enough, there were still some disadvantages. For example, the whole thing was like a small prison carriage. The window was a lattice, and the curtain was outside, so it couldn't be opened at all. But there was a skylight above, and there seemed to be a baffle on it, so there was no need to worry about the wind and rain. Such a design was to blind her. Under normal circumstances, she should be directly blindfolded. So, it could be seen that the other party had put in a lot of effort. Jingwan had a faint guess in her heart. What she had to do now was to wait quietly. Not wanting her to spy, Jingwan was too lazy to pay attention to anything. She closed her eyes and rested. Anyway, she didn't have the ability to distinguish things and directions outside by listening to subtle sounds. Time passed by quietly. She felt every movement of the baby. Perhaps the baby cared for her mother, so it didn't move violently. Moreover, Jingwan didn't show any signs of dizziness or chest tightness. It couldn't be better. And in the next part of the journey, Jingwan also found that the journey was not fast. It seemed to be completely based on her endurance. This was different from what she had expected. After all, her husband had been gone for a long time. Normally, they should have rushed to catch up. But now, every once in a while, they would let her down to get some fresh air and exercise. And in terms of food, they were also meticulous. 3 days later, the person Jingwan wanted to see finally appeared. Although she had expected it, she was still very surprised when she saw it. Chapter 566. This surprise didn't last long. It almost disappeared in a flash. "Young Master Sunday," Jingwan said. "Princess Luo." Sun Yilin paused. Some words seemed to be on the tip of his tongue before he came up with such an address. Logically speaking, there was no problem with this address. However, it seemed to have a completely different meaning when it came from Sun Yilin's mouth. It was a little indifferent and seemed a little unwilling. Jingwan's eyes were still on his face. She was exceptionally magnanimous. She didn't have any emotional fluctuations in her heart, but she was more or less curious. She knew that his face was burned and disfigured because of the fire. However, when she met him when Duchess Ding passed away, his face was still covered with a white cloth. It didn't look as serious as it was now. Was it not the first time that Sun Yilin met people with such a face? He could completely ignore other people's gazes. However, when this person was Jingwan, he still felt embarrassed. He had an impulse to hide and hide. Although he tried his best to hide, there were some things that couldn't be hidden even if he wanted to. Especially in front of people he cared about, there was always a sense of uneasiness. It was a little awkward. Whether it was the former young master Sun Yilin or the later Sun Yilin, whose temperament changed greatly and became unpredictable, it was not at all similar to the former young master Sun Yilin or the later Sun Yilin, whose temperament changed greatly and became unpredictable. There was a reason why he didn't see Jingwan at the first time. However, when he saw her and mustered up the courage to face her, compared to Jingwan, Sun Yilin's eyes seemed a little unscrupulous. He moved his eyes inch by inch on Jingwan's body. It seemed that the former etiquette and the noble young master who was quite respectful to women was just an illusion. Now, he was the real him. However, Jingwan didn't really care about these things. It was just that she didn't want to lose a piece of flesh, so she didn't retreat at all. However, Sun Yilin's thoughts. To her, Sun Yilin was actually just a passerby in her life. He really didn't hold much weight. If he wasn't Sun Yijia's closest brother, and if it wasn't for her husband, who was super jealous, constantly thinking about him, Jingwan was afraid that she would have already forgotten about this person. Jingwan thought that her marriage with Sun Yilin was ruined by someone. She didn't feel guilty because she knew that even if no one was involved between her and Sun Yilin, most of it would fail. Therefore, she didn't feel sorry for him. Except for those who had been in the limelight for a long time, being stared at like this more or less made people unhappy. Previously, she thought that Sun Yilin had already let go of her. She didn't feel anything from the beginning to the end. She was just happy that her husband wouldn't use this as an excuse to make a fuss. Now, it seemed that it wasn't the case at all. This was definitely not narcissism, but Sun Yilin's behavior was too obvious. She couldn't even pretend that she didn't know. Jingwan actually didn't agree with this situation. After all, it was just a one-sided love. It wasn't mutual love. Jingwan found it hard to understand. Perhaps it had something to do with her personality. She couldn't fall in love with someone first. Moreover, they had only interacted with each other a few times. How did he fall in love with her so deeply? Jingwan felt that this was extremely inconceivable. In Jingwan's eyes, it was unreasonable for someone to resort to unscrupulous means because they couldn't get what they wanted. As for those who hurt others because of love and hate, it was even more despicable. After all, the other party didn't owe them anything. Of course, before the matter was clear, Jingwan wouldn't jump to conclusions. What Sun Yilin was doing now might not have anything to do with her. Jingwan thought that her sentiments weren't to the point where she would take everything on herself. Even if it was really related to her, she expressed that she wouldn't take the blame. If just breaking off the engagement could make him turn evil, then it would make people suspect that Sun Yilin's mind was actually only 3 years old. Or maybe he was seriously in the second stage of middle school. As long as he didn't get what he wanted, he would destroy the world. Sun Yilin's gaze finally fell on Jingwan's stomach. There was an unknown darkness in his eyes. Jingwan was unmoved just now. But now, she couldn't help but move her body. Her hand was placed on her lower abdomen. Her defensive posture was too obvious. Sun Yilin saw this and calmly withdrew his gaze. He concealed his attitude. He didn't say much about Jingwan's movements. As for what he was thinking in his heart, no one knew. "Are you okay?" Perhaps because he had adjusted his state of mind, Sun Yilin was much gentler. His negative emotions seemed to have dissipated, but he still deliberately ignored the way he addressed her. "Thank you for your concern, young Master Sunday. I'm fine." This wasn't a polite remark. Jingwan was really fine now. Sun Yilin sat down beside Jingwan. "That's good. If you need anything, just let me know." "Is that so? I thought that as a hostage, I should have the consciousness of a hostage. If the treatment was too good, it would give people the illusion that they were a VIP. If the situation became worse later, there might be a psychological gap. This wasn't good." Sun Yilin was silent for a moment. "You're pregnant now. If you have any request, it's not too much." He paused. "Even if it's not a special situation, you deserve the best at any time. Young Master Sun, you're from a famous family. I think you know the etiquette and rules better than anyone else. You've overstepped." Sun Yilin was silent. For a moment, the corner of his mouth twitched. It was strange, evil, and gloomy. "Rules. I followed the rules too much. That's why I was schemed against and robbed of my wife." Jingwan's heart jumped slightly. Did Sun Yilin know everything? That's impossible, right? "What do you mean, young Master Sun?" It was best to stop this topic. However, Jingwan needed to know more information now. The more she knew, the more advantageous it would be for her in the future. So it was best to follow his intentions and slowly fish for information. "What do you mean?" Sun Yilin once thought that Li Hongyuan didn't treat Jingwan well. A man like that, with a high status and no power on the surface, would do things his own way without any scruples. Compared to those with power, he was much more casual. Without power, he was pampered even more. If he didn't have power, the emperor would favor him even more. If he didn't have power, there would be no restrictions. A person like that would definitely be self-centered and wouldn't consider other people's feelings. Moreover, he was also a womanizer. Whoever became his wife was destined to be neglected and wronged. However, reality was different from what he thought. He didn't believe it and didn't want to believe it. He stubbornly thought that if it wasn't him, no one would be able to give her happiness. But the truth was. That's right. How could Li Hongyuan tell you what he did? Wouldn't that be exposing his despicable, shameless, and dirty side? Even a shameless person would still pay attention to his image sometimes. Young Master Sun, it's not gentlemanly to criticize our prince behind his back. Sun Yilin looked at Jingwan. His eyes never left her. He was somewhat unhappy that Jingwan was so protective of Li Hongyuan. However, from Jingwan's point of view, he could understand. But when he thought that if Li Hongyuan hadn't interfered, Jingwan would be protecting him now, the gloominess in his heart became stronger. I used to be a gentleman, but what was the result? I regret it now. If I had been a villain, I believe the result would be completely different. It's enough to regret it for a lifetime. Jingwan frowned slightly. She felt that the current situation was a little bad. Sun Yilin reached out and seemed to want to smooth her eyebrows. Jingwan subconsciously avoided it. Sun Yilin was not angry. He put his hand down and put it on the back of Jingwan's hand. When Jingwan wanted to pull away, he increased his strength, so that Jingwan could not succeed. This was the person he liked. Because of the etiquette, even when they were engaged, they did not touch each other's skin. Now, it seemed that he got what he wanted, and there was a strange excitement. Jingwan did not pull him, but her face was completely cold. Let go. Jingwan. This address made Sun Yilin's unwillingness disappear. However, it was still not intimate enough, and he was not satisfied. I won't hurt you, and I don't want to hurt you. This is all I want now. So, please don't refuse me, okay? I'm a married woman, and if I'm a lady, I shouldn't be violated by you. You're simply unreasonable. Sadness flashed in Sun Yilin's eyes, and his face became cold. Wan, it doesn't matter what you say now. I've already decided to be a villain. Now, I'm the knife, and you're the fish. Even if it's not for anything else, even if it's for the child in your belly, you shouldn't do anything to anger me, right? Jingwan did not resist, but her eyes became colder and colder. If her impression of Sun Yilin was good before, now it was completely negative. Sun Yilin knew that Jingwan would hate him, but he couldn't control himself because he knew that this might be his last chance, and he didn't want to give up. It doesn't matter if you hate me. We'll have a lot of time in the future, and I'll gradually change your opinion of me. In the future. You'll live in hell in the future. Jingwan sneered. Wan, do you think I can't win against him? Let's not talk about winning or losing for the time being. Wan, do you know what Li Hongyuan is doing now? You have a beauty in your arms, and you've probably forgotten her name. In this way, do you still think about him? Jingwan didn't believe a single word. She believed that even if those people had used some kind of method to put a curse on him, he wouldn't do anything to hurt her. Jingwan didn't even have that kind of confidence in herself. She had seen that man's ability and his tenacity. She believed that as long as it was something he wanted to do, there was nothing he couldn't do. This kind of mentality was simply to the point of blindness. Sun Yilin's heart was burning with jealousy. This was an emotion that he had never felt before. Why could a man like Li Hongyuan gain her trust so much? Insidious, cunning, treacherous, and arrogant. There was nothing praiseworthy about him. He even deceived everyone in the world, but took all the benefits. It seems that if I don't let you see it with your own eyes, you won't believe it. So, let's wait and see. In fact, I don't want you to see that kind of scene. As a wife, no matter how much feelings you have for your husband, you won't feel good when you see him being intimate with another woman. The deeper the feelings, the greater the hurt. It's really not easy for the son of an aristocratic family to have such awareness. These words might be praise in normal times, but now, it was more sarcastic. I just don't want to use this kind of method to test the depth of your feelings for him. If that's the case, you really don't need to test it. I can tell you now that I'm sincere to him, and I'll never change it until death. Sun Yilin suddenly increased the strength of his hand. Jingwan was in pain, but her face was expressionless, and she didn't show any weakness. Sun Yilin's expression became somewhat deranged. You should have been mine. If it wasn't for Li Hongyuan's interference, you and I should have lived together, and followed each other in life and death. Jingwan's expression was shocked. It wasn't Sun Yilin's words that made her like this, but his face. That pit, which originally looked like an ordinary scar, now seemed to be alive. Something was wriggling under the surface. Not only that, the scar was expanding at a speed visible to the naked eye. She even suspected that at some point, his entire face would become that terrifying appearance. "Your face," Jingwan couldn't help but cry out. The deranged Sun Yilin seemed to be strangled by his neck. For a moment, he was speechless. Then, he seemed to come back to his senses and hurriedly reached out to cover his face. "Don't look, don't look." His actions were really like those of a disfigured woman, as if the most embarrassing thing had been discovered, and he was panicking. Jingwan couldn't help but frown. Even a 3-year-old child could tell that this wasn't normal. Not to mention other things, was Sun Yilin really disfigured by fire at the beginning? She didn't know if it was because of the change on his face, but Sun Yilin suddenly got up and rushed down from the carriage in a panic. That posture was so embarrassing. Jingwan's frown deepened. She now suspected that Sun Yilin was also controlled by the goo worm. Of course, even if that was the case, what he did was unforgivable. Jingwan sat in the carriage, lost in thought. Outside the carriage, there was a faint sound of little Blackie's voice. She seemed to be arguing with someone. She could basically guess the reason. After all, a stranger ran into her carriage. As someone by her side, how could she be indifferent? Jingwan didn't do anything. Little Blackie might be suffering some bad treatment now, but if she paid too much attention to it, it might make things worse for her. Her current treatment was because of Sun Yilin. Other people with unknown origins might not be willing to give her preferential treatment in their hearts. Therefore, the only one who suffered would be the people by her side. Little Blackie was the only one. Jingwan slowly closed her eyes, hiding all her thoughts. The curtain of the carriage moved again. Jingwan opened her eyes and saw Sun Yilin appear again. His face no longer had that strange change, but the scar on his face had increased by at least 1/10 compared to before. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.